You kind of said it toward the end, convince other people. Let's say I do that. I agree with you. What then?
Well, you all heard that, right? I mean, the basic idea was what happens once we change people's ideas. Well, then it's easy. Because the fact is, like it or not, we get the politicians we deserve and want. So everybody says, I want lower taxes. And then they ask, well, would you cut this program? No. Would you cut this program? No. Would you cut this program? No. Expand, expand, expand. So we get the politicians that we want and deserve. But if what we want is actually a society in which we're free to pursue our happiness, then that's exactly what we'll get. Now you have to then develop plans for how do we get from where we are today to a truly free country, once again, where what you earn is yours to figure out how to best serve your life. But this is not really a hard problem. It's not hard to unwind a system like this. It'll be uncomfortable, but we don't have any good options anyway. One way or another, it's going to be hard on some people. But it's not that hard to wind down a handout program. I mean, you just make it, less and less over time until it's gone. And then it's just a debate over how much time. So what really has to happen is fundamentally people's ideas have to be changed. And then we can have plans for specifically what do we vote on. But those will come. People, believe me, I spend a lot of time in Washington, more than I would like to. And there's no shortage of people to come up with plans to do something that they think is popular. The problem is this isn't popular yet. And so the issue is really how do we make the goal popular? And at that point, actually carrying it out, there's a lot of smart people who are thinking about how to carry out things everybody wants to achieve in the first place. So that's my short answer to that.
Hello. I just want to say, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Overall, I always kind of felt like, people should be doing their own thing. And, in real life, there is no safety net. However, I think more and more people these days are sicker and sicker than they ever have been. Like cancer was a really rare thing a long time ago. Now it's happening all the time. And I think that's because basically the corporations, along with corrupt government, are making profits by essentially getting people sick. If you look at what's in the food, the water, the air, oil companies doing what they're doing, tobacco. I mean, it's insane the amount of money they make by making people sick. So to a degree, not only do I think we need a social net because of that, I think the corporations, if they actually paid their fair share, there's actually enough money out there for everybody not to have to work and to be able to actually do what they want to do and be happy. And that's just, so I mean, like if you just the US, half the GDP right now is military. That literally half the money comes in. You look at the secret programs, the military, it's all going there, and corporations aren't even paying taxes. So isn't that the issue? Isn't that a much greater and more important issue? And how does that sort of fit into what you're talking about here with the safety net?
So my view is that the purpose of government is to protect our freedom abroad, from threats abroad and threats here. So police, military, and ultimately law courts. So we can debate about exactly is our military functioning the way I think it should, but I want to challenge the premise of the question, which is in effect that corporations and so on have an interest in making us sick. You mentioned oil companies. When did human beings start living longer? Our average age of living was about 30 until we had the Industrial Revolution powered by fossil fuel companies. It's fossil fuels that have made us living to 80. So the idea that the only reason people get cancer now and they didn't used to is they used to be dead first from other causes. Fossil fuels and the companies who have made our lives longer and more enjoyable have been the biggest boon to human civilization in history. I mean, this is basically, we had to do everything with muscle power, and now we can do it with machine power because we have these immense machine calories that keep us alive. And do they have side effects? Of course they have side effects. Everything we do has side effects. But one of the great things about things like fossil fuel energy is it gives you the means to then deal with those side effects, to deal with issues like pollution and so on. So I think the greatest boon to human civilization has been big business corporations. The profit motive means that there's people right now who are staying up later and working harder in order to figure out how to make your life longer, more enjoyable, more satisfying, to figure out ways that you can read more books, see more movies, drive further, live in bigger homes. That's amazing. There's people working for your good because they want to make a lot of money. That's awesome. I want to make a lot of money. I picked the wrong career to do it, but nevertheless, I mean, these are really amazing things. And what we really want then is a system that protects our rights, because there clearly are people, whether it's in big business or government or anything else, who want to make our lives worse. And you need to protect those rights from things like a Bernie Madoff who's going to steal a bunch of your money, or from somebody who's going to violate your property rights by dumping a lot of wastewater into it. So we need a government. We need a government to protect those rights. But beyond that, no, the greatest thing that you could have is the profit motive that drives people to do amazing, amazing things to better human life. And that's really what we should admire and strive to protect. And what the welfare state does, in effect, is says, hey, you should be guaranteed rewards not for sitting around thinking about how to make other people's lives better, but just for existing. And how are we going to do that? By taking money from the people who made your lives better and giving it to you. And I think that is completely immoral, and that's what I'm challenging.
Hey, I think what he was pointing at was it's not that fossil fuel is making people sick. It's that for today's living standards, I think it would be improved, and old people wouldn't be getting as sick. Except, let's say, healthcare. They have certain drugs that have you dependent on the drugs instead of just simply curing you, because they make money for the pharmaceutical companies, and that is why.
But that doesn't make any sense. Think about it. So let's say I create 2 drugs. I create one that will keep you sick but keep you paying for a long time, and I create one that will cure you. Could I charge you more for the one that cured you? Would you be willing to pay more for that than for the one that kept you sick for a long time?
Well, it depends. Not if you don't expect the disease to actually cure. If you either don't expect the disease to actually kill you, or you don't expect it to be that bad. If they don't have a sense of scale.
The only reason we buy into these ideas, I know people in the pharmaceutical industry. They're not these demons who sit behind desks and try to keep us sick. And do you think that would not get into the papers if they did? No, everybody hates pharmaceutical companies. The Washington Post would love it if they could have an expose on how they're keeping this cure aside. No, these are people who want to help people by and large, and they do. They help people in a lot of ways. And the fact is that if they came up with a way to cure, you would be willing to pay more for a cure than you would for something that lagged you along for a long time, which is why economically it wouldn't make sense to hold back a cure. It would just make sense to charge a lot of money for it. And that's great. You should if you're actually curing diseases, but it's really, really hard to cure them. I mean, one of my good friends is one of the leading Ebola people. You've probably seen him on CNN lately and everything like that. Figuring out how to cure these things is a really, really hard problem. And thank goodness for the profit motive. There's a bunch of people out there trying to solve it. But no, I don't think that there's this secret, our neighbors are conspiring to keep us sick, including their own family members. I mean, remember, all of these people who are holding back these cures, supposedly, they have family members who have cancer, who have heart disease, who have all these things. Are they doing it for a buck? That's ridiculous. It's not true.
It's not a matter of just holding back. It's the amount of tests that have to be ran to prove.
Well, but that's the bigger problem there. So you mentioned, just for the record, so everybody hears it, it's not just holding back cures, it's the amount of tests and so on. The primary evil there is the FDA. The FDA raises the cost of creating new drugs and bringing them to the market by thousands and thousands of percent. In a genuinely free market, other people wouldn't have the freedom to arbitrarily hold back drugs that you wanted to take. You would get to decide for yourself. And so companies would go through testing in order to make sure that what they were doing was safe and effective, but not in the arbitrary way the FDA does. And so the cost of drugs would be a fraction of what they are today. I regard the FDA as one of the worst killers of Americans in this country for that very reason. So, all right, last question.
I was just wondering, what do you think a free state looks like?
A free state? I think it looks essentially, although not exactly, I think it looks essentially like what existed in America before, let's say, roughly 1900. Now, let me make some caveats, first of all. So the clear number one caveat is that for a bunch of the time before 1900, there was slavery, which is one of the most evil institutions in history. So clearly, I'm excluding that as an example of freedom. The second thing is there was a bunch of government interference in all sorts of ways, whether it was subsidies and cronyism, handouts to big business, special favors for business. There was all sorts of regulations. There were minuscule handout programs. But essentially what you saw in America before 1900 and definitely before 1935 was essentially the kind of government that I think is right, which is one that's focused fundamentally on protecting people's freedom, protecting their rights, and leaving them free to pursue their own happiness. And so that is the model that we should be aspiring to. And what we see then historically is the closer the governments have come to approximating genuine freedom, the better life has gotten. It was, the more free we were, the faster we grew, the better the culture was, and so on. And so I think if we're going to look historically, that's the best model. But we can do better. We can do way better. We've come so far just in terms of knowledge, technology, and wealth, given the freedom that has remained, that if we had genuine freedom today, it would be an inspiring sight. There's no reason why education, healthcare, any of these can't be as entrepreneurial and innovative as Silicon Valley. And that's what I want to see, and that's why I think a good first step is get rid of programs that stop treating people as able to support their own lives, respect their need to think, produce, and to support their own lives, and treat them like burdens and resources. And if we take that first step, we'll be on the road to a genuinely free society. Thank you.
Awesome. Woo.